Welcome. This is CMAB's Project Grant Informational Webinar. My name is Sue Legatt. I am the Program Officer for the Central Minnesota Arts Board. I have pale skin and dark hair. And also joining us today from CMAB staff is Melissa Marudis. Glasses, pale skin, and blonde hair. Melissa is our content manager, and so she is excellent. If you have any technical issues when you're working on your application or anything around quick questions around eligibility or what something means in the application, Melissa is excellent for that. And you can also reach out to me as well for questions. All right, so before we get too far into this, I want to point out a couple accessibility options. Throughout the webinar, we will take a couple of breaks for you to ask questions. And at the very end, we will ask for any questions, and there will be hopefully a little bit of time for us to discuss things a bit further. I also want to invite you to sign up for virtual office hours. It's a 30-minute one-on-one with me via Zoom. That's available on our homepage. At the very top, there's a blue button that says Contact Us, and you can sign up there and we can talk about your application or whatever it is you're working on in more detail. And then you also always have the option to call or email us. Those are also available in our Contact Us on the website. So the purpose of today's webinar is to walk through the project grant and provide tips on how to make your application stand out. We'll also go through the entire application and review process. The goal is that you become more familiar with the application, feel more prepared to apply, and have a better understanding of the review process and how to be more successful as an applicant. I want to take a quick moment to recognize our funders. Minnesota has a truly unique funding system, the only one like it in the United States. CMAB receives funding from two primary sources. The first is the Minnesota State Arts Board through a legislative appropriation from both the General Fund and the Arts and Cultural Legacy Amendment. CMAB is one of 11 regional arts councils throughout the state, and as Region 7W, we serve Benton, Sherburne, Stearns, and Wright counties. We also receive funding from the McKnight Foundation, who works to support Minnesota's artists and culture bearers to advance a more just, creative, and abundant future where people and planet thrive. The project grant is supported entirely with state funding. The project grant is a $9,000 up to $9,000 award intended to support art-focused events such as performances, exhibitions, festivals, educational experiences, or cultural celebrations. It is available to Region 7W arts organizations, community groups with fiscal sponsors, nonprofits, public schools, and local governments, and it is the only one of our grants that is also available to out-of-region groups doing program in region. But equipment expenses are only available to in-region arts organizations. This program also requires a 10% match, and we'll talk more about that in the budget area. Funding can be spent on supplies and materials, artist fees, research and development, and facilitation of activities, facility and equipment rentals, or other unique expenses specific to the proposed effort. The application comes with a budget template, which I will show you later, that helps you lay out all of your expenses and how you plan to use those grant funds. The 10% match is also in the budget template and auto-calculated for you to ensure that it is, this will all help you make sure that your budget is well-researched and accurate. As with all of our grants, Project Grant has specific criteria that the applicants need to address. Each criteria has a series of criteria statements to help articulate what the review panel will be looking for in an application. A smart applicant will use these criteria statements and address them at some point throughout their application. Sometimes the application will ask for specific information connected to a criteria statement, and sometimes it's up to the applicant to work that information into the application. Think of your criteria statements as a cheat sheet. The panel uses them to review the application, and you can use them to write the application. The criteria for project grant are artistic merit and quality, demonstrated need and access, equity and collaboration, and ability and project readiness. We're going to go through each of the 20 criteria statements and discuss what they mean and why they are important. Artistic merit and quality does not mean the cost or the experience or the fame of an artist. Instead, it is measured by the ability of the artist or the arts organization to present an experience that expresses original thought with an appropriate technical skill level. All right. The first criteria statement for artistic merit and quality is activities featured qualified artists and artwork that demonstrate creativity, skill, and a distinct artistic vision. This statement is usually most supported by the work samples submitted to demonstrate that the artist is qualified in a proposed field. Use the work sample description area wisely to further articulate this idea. The next statement is artists are meaningfully involved in designing and/or delivering the experience. This grant program allows for a wide range of proposals. If, for example, you are proposing an open mic night that performers may not necessarily be involved in the planning of the event. However, you might be planning that event based on feedback from artists at previous performances. If you are hosting a workshop series with a specific artist, it would make sense that you would have that artist involved in the design of the workshop as far as what materials may be needed, how the space needs to be set up, if there is any additional equipment or supplies that go beyond the obvious, that artist will help you plan that. The next statement is artistic experience deepens an understanding or appreciation of the art form. Generally, this means that what you are proposing in some way increases the audience or the participant's knowledge. Proposing to host the same play for the 5th year in the row probably would not do this. But proposing an obscure musical that no one in the region has done before, you would be expanding your audience's knowledge. If you have a more specific focus with your arts organization and you are proposing to do something similar to what you have previously done, it's really important that you demonstrate growth. What happened previously and how are you going to expand on that to make it deeper and to further develop the understanding of that art form. The next statement, the artistic experience encourages reflection of a topic, issue, or perspective. This one often gets mixed up with the previous one about deepening an understanding. Try to think of the last one as an art form, the technique, the medium, the skill set, the artist involved. This statement refers more to the concept being explored through the art. What is the artist saying, or how is the experience challenging the audience to re-examine a topic, issue, or perspective? And the final statement for artistic merit and quality is the project supports the applicant's mission. Every organization or community group was formed to accomplish a specific mission. The application requires applicants share that mission. Whatever your effort that is being proposed, it should align with the mission you have provided. For example, you would not expect to see a youth theater company focused on skill development propose to host a watercolor painting workshop. Sometimes the proposal is unique to the organization and may not seem in line with their mission. It's up to you to explain this clearly, how the effort will creatively enhance the organization's usual programming and make them overall stronger or assist their community in some way, especially if you're responding to a community request, which comes up soon. All right, pro tip, know your artist before you apply. It is extremely difficult for a panel to assess artistic merit and quality when you do not know who the artists involved are going to be. If there is a reason for not having this specific information beforehand, you need to really explain that carefully. Otherwise, the panel is just going to be lost. And we have seen this before where otherwise good applications score low because they have not explained this well enough, or too much of what they are proposing relies on the individual artist involved, but they don't know who that individual artist is. All right. The next criterion is demonstrated need and access. This category is really focusing on why you are bringing or why you are proposing what you are proposing. What evidence do you have that it is a welcomed effort and that it will be successfully received? How will the audience experience it, and what might prevent them from experiencing the effort fully and equally? The first criteria statement is the project is designed to meet a specific need, interest, or opportunity identified by the applicant and community. This statement is asking you to share your research or understanding of the community's needs and interests to justify the effort. Has the community asked for this type of event? Have they shown support for similar events in the past? Was there previously an event in the community lost that this proposal will now address? This criteria statement has a specific section in the application for you to add that information. The next statement is the applicant demonstrates authentic understanding of the community or audience it serves. This statement could be addressed in several locations throughout the grant application, including the proposal narrative, the organization's background, and the information fields in this criteria section. It's basically looking for your history with the community you are proposing to serve to ensure that that engagement is authentic, informed, and positively impactful. The third criteria statement is the project provides an arts experience not otherwise available for the identified community and/or audience. This statement is different from the artistic merit and quality area because it is asking how the experience will impact the identified community as opposed to how it will deepen their appreciation. For this statement, think about the audience or participant's experience. For example, if you are proposing an arts exhibition, bringing in an obscure alternative experimental artist might challenge the audience and deepen their understanding. But a small gallery hosting a juried regional youth exhibition is a completely different proposal. They're both exhibitions, but would be promoted, facilitated, budgeted, and shared with the public very differently. Think about the structure of your proposed activity and how it's appropriate for your identified community or audience. The next criteria statement, if my computer will let me advance the slide, there we go. There is evidence of community support, such as input, participation, commitments of time or resources, in-kind contributions, or partnerships. This statement also has its own information field in the application because it is specific and important. If your community support is financial, such as donations or in-kind support, you would want to explain it in the application, but also include it in the budget template. If the support is through feedback, surveys, or another form of community engagement and research, you'll want to explain that very carefully. Make sure the panel understands the community's passion for this proposal with specific commitments. The next statement, the proposal includes plans to address barriers to access, such as physical, financial, cultural, etc., for the intended participants. This statement also has its own information field. You'll want to explain what steps you've taken to ensure that all audience or participants can engage fully and equally with the proposed activity. It could be through offering translators or free tickets or hearing devices or large print programs or promoting in a variety of ways to ensure a diversity in your audience or really anything that is intentional and appropriate for your goals. Keep the intention of what you are proposing at the forefront and make sure that it is available to everyone, really. So that extra effort. Okay, this brings us to the third criterion, which is equity and collaboration. Unlike the previous criteria focusing on access and how people will learn about or attend an event, this criteria focuses on expansive planning and what the organization is doing to reach a wide range of people in the community and include them in the planning, design, facilitation, promotion, participation, evaluation, and all other aspects of the proposed activity. We refer to this as IDEA initiatives or efforts. IDEA stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility. To fully understand this criteria, we're going to take a little bit of time and examine it. While thinking about this, or while I'm sharing about this, please consider what you can do with the informed intentionality. Avoid making assumptions, and whenever possible, involve those you wish to reach in your discussions, in your planning phase. Don't just give them a seat at the table. Make space so that they can also lead whatever the effort is, how your organization is structuring. So we're going to just go through this a little bit. All right, inclusion. This refers to creating a welcoming space where people can participate fully without fear or bias. A good way to live this is to make sure your organization's leaders reflect the community you wish to serve. An example of this might be to create efforts specifically for a target community, such as creating your promotional materials in a variety of languages and placing them in locations that make sense for that community. Another example would be to include people from that community in all aspects of the project from the beginning to end, so your efforts are done earnestly and not in vain. Next, diversity. Diversity is often limited to ethnicity, but refers to an effort or organization reflecting equally or exceeding the demographics of underserved members within the community. To help with this, think about the makeup of your staff and if they reflect the community you serve. If not, you can always partner with leaders of an underserved community and make the effort more mutually beneficial. Equity is an intentional effort to ensure each participant receives a full and fair experience, including additional efforts to balance the experience of an underserved community. A common example of this is pay what you can sliding scale for ticket sales, or to disproportionately support underserved artists until they understood and valued at the same level as artists from a dominant community. Side note, I just bought tickets to an event not in our region. The tickets that were for that were wheelchair accessible were $5 more expensive than a different ticket in the same section of the theater. So that would be an inequity because the person with the wheelchair has to pay more to attend than somebody who is more able-bodied. All right, and the final part of IDEA is accessibility. Accessibility goes beyond the physical structure that is hosting an event. For example, if it's an outdoor event, it could refer to providing water or shade for free, having bilingual staff that are wearing Ask Me Your Question shirts in multiple languages, or quiet and private spaces for breastfeeding mothers or neurodivergent people who need to take a break. There is a lot of overlap in the IDEA categories, but the ultimate goal is that organizations are growing and planning in ways that are appropriate for all members of the greater community, and especially the underserved members of your own community. Okay, the criteria statements for equity and collaboration are: the organization's efforts demonstrate intentional actions that support inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. Just like each organization has unique needs and goals, so does your community. You are not asked to provide information on each area of IDEA, but to provide whatever real efforts you are doing for the proposed effort. They should make sense for the proposal, your organization, your budget, and your timeline, and the community you wish to serve. The next statement is: proposal has clear goals and strategies in place to engage underserved communities. An underserved community is any group that has historically not received the same level of support as other groups. Most commonly, they include senior citizens, youth, low-income residents, global majority or BIPOC, LGBTQ, individuals with disabilities, special needs, or atypical neurology. I encourage you to consider your community, however you determine what your community is, and then see who within that community is not being equally represented. Next. The next statement is: collaborations or partnerships strengthen the project and are mutually beneficial. This statement seeks to ensure that everyone involved in the project is not only the right fit for the project, but involved in a fair and respectful manner. And the final criteria statement for equity and collaboration is: the project supports the long-term strength of the applicant, partners, or the region's arts ecosystem. Whatever you propose, it should make sense for you. Your proposed effort should align with your organization's abilities, strengths, interests, and long-term goals. Think about the impact of the effort beyond the immediate results. The last criterion is ability and project readiness. This section is going to focus on the overall design of the proposal, who is involved beyond the creatives, how you plan to use grant funds, and whether or not you're capable of successfully completing the proposal as described. There are 6 criteria statements for this criterion. The first statement, the project team and/or partners are well qualified with clearly defined roles and relevant experience. This statement will explore the abilities of key members of the project team and if the project is designed in a way that supports everyone and their efforts. The next statement is the project plan is clear, realistic, with a logical timeline and thoughtful use of staff, artists, and volunteers. For this statement, it's important that you provide details on how you have planned your proposal so all those involved are fully utilized. There is specific information field for the timeline, and you should include as much information as necessary to explain your progress and your plan, but avoid too much information that it might just confuse people or become overwhelming in the amount of information. There is also a field for additional elements that have not yet been determined. If it's something important, like the artists involved haven't yet been contracted or you haven't narrowed in on who you want to bring in, you should explain that very clearly in this area and explain why that hasn't been settled and what the plan will be to finalize it. The next criteria statement is the marketing or outreach plan supports the proposal's goals and encourages public engagement. There is an information field for you to explain your marketing and promotion strategy. Keep in mind that this could be something done at the beginning of the project to recruit participants or something done towards the end to promote the public events. This strategy should also make sense for the goals of the project, especially if they involve reaching a new community or people from a variety of backgrounds. If you, as an organization, through this effort, are attempting to work with or expand your collaboration with a very specific community group, the promotion time or the effort put into promoting may need to be longer because you have to allow for translations or you have to allow for the research to know where and how to best promote the event to get the results that you're hoping to get. So that should be reflected through this criteria statement. The fourth statement is the budget is reasonable, achievable, and reflects appropriate compensation for artists, collaborators, and staff. Panelists always look at the budget carefully. There should be no surprises here. You do not want to have something in the budget that was not referred to in the application, especially maybe the project narrative. And you also don't want to have something that you talk about in the application not then be reflected in the budget. We use an Excel spreadsheet as our budget template that you download from the application, and I'm going to go through that in a minute. You will want to save this file as an Excel spreadsheet on your computer because if you are funded, you will need to reopen it and use that same file to submit your final report. When you submit it to the application, however, it's submitted as a PDF. All right, the next criteria statement for ability and project readiness is the project outcomes are measurable, realistic, and focused on changes in knowledge, awareness, behavior, and community benefit. Very often, people confuse outputs for outcome. An output is the result of something happening. If you were applying to fund a new gas kiln and you got the grant, the output would be that you purchased the kiln. An outcome, however, is changes. An outcome is something that measures a change because of that effort. So in the case of the gas kiln, your outcome would be that participating artists increased their knowledge of gas-fired ceramics. That knowledge is the change. For more information about outcomes and evaluation methods, I strongly encourage you to look at our YouTube video, and that is at Central MN Arts Board is the YouTube channel. There's a whole bunch of videos on there, but the outcome and evaluations video I think is especially helpful. All right, the final criteria statement for ability and project readiness is the evaluation plan includes appropriate tools and methods to assess progress and inform future work. If your outcome determines the success of an effort, the evaluation method is how you measure the outcome. You use that evaluation method to know if you achieved your proposed outcome. Yes. Okay. Pro tip. Write your application in another program. Check the word count or the character count, share it with other people, get the feedback. Our panelists for this particular grant come from the community. So if you share what you've written with somebody else on your staff or somebody else from the arts community and they understand it, great. If they're confused by it, there's a good chance that the panel will also be confused by it. So doing it in a separate Word doc or something, making sure my character count and editing it, taking my time, and then just copying it into the application works best for me. We have a new policy regarding AI. The shortened version is that applications with excessive AI-generated content may be deemed ineligible. There are a lot of ways that AI can influence an application or cause issues around copyright that make it difficult for us to enter into contracts with an applicant. At the same time, there are AI tools that can successfully or appropriately assist an applicant who may struggle with aspects of an application or presenting their ideas in English. If you would like to know more about this, I encourage you to read our full AI policy online or ask us if you need more clarification. We've gone through the criteria statements, and now we're going to dig into that application. While the criteria statements are used to evaluate the application, how you address them is done throughout the application by submitting specific documentation or narratives. You'll want to show that your proposal is well thought out with specific dates, people, locations, and that you have the ability to complete the proposal as described, and that the community will support this effort. You'll also need to explain what the goal is for your effort and what will change if you complete it successfully. Those are those outcomes. We're going to walk through the application and take a look at just a few key things. So the first is when you open the application, you'll need to share what type of organization you are. This will automatically route you to submit additional information. If you're a 501c3, you'll need to submit your representative contact and contact information, your board officer contacts, and your EIN number. If you are a group with a fiscal sponsor, you'll need to submit your fiscal sponsor's information and their contact person's information. You'll need to provide the fiscal sponsor's EIN number and a signed agreement with them. Not everybody can be a fiscal sponsor. Fiscal sponsors are legally responsible for what you are proposing. They are basically loaning you their nonprofit status. So they need to have the infrastructure and the personnel in place to manage that agreement and everything that's happening with that. So not all nonprofits can or should be fiscal sponsors for community groups. There's a sample of a fiscal sponsor agreement in the application. So if you are curious, you can see what that might look like. Okay, once you have completed all the eligibility requirements, you can move on to the information portion of the application. Each portion of the application is divided by criteria, with the criteria statements provided as a reminder, and you can see that here. Sometimes a criteria statement will have its own information field to address it directly. It isn't always the case, and at times you will need to address a criteria statements by incorporating that information into an information field that you feel is appropriate. Not addressing a criteria statement does not mean that your application is ineligible or doomed. We're going past the beginning and start date, but I do want to point out that you cannot receive funding for any aspect of the proposal that has happened prior to the grant being approved. The written description area is one of our longest information fields. It is 5,000 characters. You can submit this as either a written description or, if you prefer, an audio or video description. There isn't really an advantage to doing one over the other, but the audio video description is helpful for people who feel that they don't have the writing skills that they would prefer to have for the application. So essentially, you're presenting this nice, clean package. If you start incorporating all kinds of different ideas, it gets confusing and it generally casts doubt on the panel and they score it lower. Well, under demonstrated need and access, the first criteria statement is the project is designed to meet a specific need, interest, or opportunity identified by the applicant and community. Well, the first information field in that section asks, what need, interest, or opportunity does this proposal address? Ability and project readiness, you will need to provide the project director's information. It asks for the name, phone, email, bio. If this person is overseeing the facilitation, the coordination, the planning of the event, the bio is basically asking for their background information to show that they are capable of handling what is being proposed. Under the ability and project readiness criteria section, there is a criteria that states the budget is reasonable, achievable, and reflects appropriate compensation for the artists, collaborators, and staff. The statement is at the discretion of the review panel to determine whether or not the budget is appropriate. All of our grant programs have a 12-month cycle. If you are applying right now for the project grant for something that is happening in, let's say, November, you have less than 1 month from the time the grant is awarded to the time to carry out what you are proposing. But 1 month for, say, a theater production doesn't allow time for working with the creative director, securing the copyright, holding auditions, promoting that you're going to be having auditions, the rehearsals, everything you need to get to that official production or that final production. So a spring performance would make sense to apply now in the fall. And then in the spring for project grant, you would apply for the fall performance, because that way you have all those months that you can include in your budget and properly compensate with grant funds. So think about your timeline and what you're actually applying for. And just remember that you cannot retroactively compensate something using the grant funds. Grant funds have a start date and all expenses have to be after that start date. Okay, so here is the outcomes and evaluations area. This larger field, the outcomes and evaluations description, is where you provide all of that for your outcomes. Here is your outcomes summary. This is the area that is going to be attached to your application and used to promote publicly what you are proposing to do. So this can be fairly straightforward, very simple. You're going to do this thing so that this will happen. And then below that is your evaluation plan or method summary. This is how you are going to measure whether or not those outcomes were achieved. All right. The next section of the application is the budget. This is where you'll find the budget template. This is an Excel file that you must download, fill out, and resubmit with the application. We're going to talk about this in greater detail in a minute, but I want to point out where you will find that in the application. This nice pink arrow is pointing to that area. You will also need to provide, in the final area of the application, the data collection area. The codes you'll need to fill in this area are available in the application shown with the pink arrow. The codes let us and the state know the demographics of the organizations throughout the state. At this time, those numbers are not used for more than information, but it does help us keep track of the growths in our region. Below that section are the effort and organizational impact numbers. These tell us how many people directly or indirectly will be impacted by the effort. The first number shown with the pink arrow is total artists participating. This is how many creatives are directly involved in the creation or presentation of the proposed effort. The yellow star number is how many youth have been involved in your organization's programming from the last year. This number would be the children who have attended events, visited your space, participated in a class, or whatever they may have been involved in. If you host an outdoor event, this can be tricky, so just submit your best guess. So the youth annual is how many youth have been involved in your organization over the past year. The next number shown here with the green heart is the adult annual, and this is how many adults have been engaged with your arts and your programming over the past year. The state considers an adult 19 and older. It's hard to know how many visitors are unique. So again, do your best with the numbers, and there's really no wrong answer as long as it is your best guess. And finally, the blue cloud. The blue cloud is your organization's annual operating budget from the most recently completed fiscal year. Your fiscal year, not ours. There are specific instructions based on organizational type, so please read this section carefully. I do want to point out the application draft review request option. Before you click submit, you have the option of requesting a draft review. This is where CMAB staff will go through your application and make suggestions on how you can make them stronger. All of these comments will happen in the grant system. They're in your application, and they are for your eyes only. You can take or leave whatever suggestions are made, but it can help, especially new applicants, fine-tune their application before it goes to panel. The panelists also do not see these comments. They are just for you. So I just want to point out where that request is in the application, since it can be extremely helpful. Okay, the budget template. This is often one of the more anxiety-inducing parts of the application, but it doesn't need to be. So we did make a few slight changes this summer, but I think the new version is more intuitive, it's more streamlined, and hopefully it's a lot easier for everyone to fill out. It is extremely important, I know I said it before, I'm going to say it again, that you save your template as an Excel file on your computer, your system, whatever. If you are funded, you will need to reopen that Excel file, go to the second page, and submit the final information, the actual numbers for your final report. When you submit it to the application or the final report, you're going to want to save it as a PDF. This is the budget template. If you're familiar with the previous one, you'll see that some things have been taken out to streamline it a bit. You'll also see that there is a new fourth column. So I'm just going to go through the structure of all of this. The first column shown here under the pink arrow is to identify your expense. This could be the name of the company that you are purchasing equipment from or items from. It could be the category you plan to purchase, such as supplies for this workshop, or it could be the name of your artist, whatever the large identifier is for that particular expense. The second column under the yellow star is for additional information that helps to describe this expense. If you listed the name of the company in the first column, it would make sense to state what you'll be purchasing from them in the second column. This is also a place where you could put the artist's compensation formula or facilitators, whoever's working on the project. This is where you could put their compensation formula. This will all help show the panel that you have considered every aspect of what you're proposing. The third column under the green heart is for that line's total expense. All of these numbers will add up to calculate your overall total expense for the project. The fourth column under the blue cloud is new. This is the column where you are going to determine where your CMAB funds are going to go within this project. It is helpful to ensure that you're not accidentally spending funds on an ineligible expense item, but also to make sure that your grant request amount is actually what you think it is. We very often get people requesting more grant funds than what they're actually eligible to receive, and all of that's going to be calculated now in the template. This is also going to be very helpful for funded applicants when they need to submit their final report. All of these numbers will carry over, and you'll be able to make sure that the grant funds went to where you proposed that they would go. Where and how you choose to assign your grant funds is totally up to you, as long as it is eligible. You can see in this example that the organization used grant funds to cover artist fees. We don't need to know why some areas have less than the total needed, but these numbers will help us determine the success of the proposal when we receive those final reports. At the bottom of the expense area, you'll see your efforts, total expense, and the grant amount. The project grant can only go up to $9,000, and that's after $10,000 has been counted for the match. So please check this number carefully. So far you can see what the total expenses are and what CMAB funded expenses are. After the expense section, you have the revenue section. The revenue area is very similar with different categories for the kinds of revenue you will contribute to the effort. There's also an area for earned income. This is revenue generated by your proposed effort, such as with ticket sales, booth fees, participation fees, and so on. Your effort does not need to generate revenue, but you do have to have enough revenue to cover the 10% match. And very often that can come from cash, which is sources or support finances that the organization already has on hand. I also want to point out that the in-kind section now has, when you enter it in the expense area, it will automatically copy to the revenue area. Because in-kind is both an expense and a revenue, it's something of monetary value that you would have had to pay that has now been neutralized through support from a professional in your community or a business. So it neutralizes itself. So this form will automatically do that for you now. And at the bottom, you'll see you have your total expenses. Your match is here in the pink area. That's the 10% based off your total expenses. It will deduct your revenue that you've put in and show you your eligible grant amount request. Your total projected revenue needs to be the same or more as your required match, and the two blue boxes here need to be the same. So once you figure this area out and you know exactly what you can request in funding, you can then go up into the expense area and allocate those funds throughout your budget. This example of the 10,800, this application has too much expense and not enough revenue. If you increase the revenue here, this number will come down. You can also decrease your expenses, but that's very hard to do because your proposal, your project, everything has been designed. Your expenses are your expenses. So I would encourage you to try to increase revenue instead of decreasing expenses. The review process, knowing how the system works, however, can help you prepare for it. And I would also offer that you can participate in this by volunteering for one of our review panels. After the deadline has passed, our team will go through the applications and check them for eligibility and their EIN and make sure that their EIN numbers are in good standing. We also check things like the start and end dates, the location of the public event, the budget totals, and any technical issues with the work samples. If we see something that doesn't make sense after you've submitted, we will probably call you or reach out to you in some way and ask for clarification so that we can adjust if necessary. Otherwise, your application may be deemed ineligible. After the applications are examined, they are assigned to the review panel. We work hard to ensure this panel represents a diverse group of professionals from the art world with backgrounds and art form knowledge. Usually we have 6 panelists, but it's not uncommon for someone to declare a conflict with an application or have to leave a panel for personal reasons. All panelists go through a thorough orientation process where we discuss the criteria statements, program requirements, the review process, with special attention paid to successful evaluation techniques and aware of any biases. After all panelists have completed the orientation, they will have access to the applications for their preliminary reviews. This is done on their own time and at their own pace. After about 3 weeks, the panelists come together on Zoom for a group discussion. Each application will be addressed by the panel, and it gives them the opportunity to learn things that they may have otherwise missed, to hear other panelists' perspectives, and submit their final scores for each criteria. The panelist scores are then averaged, giving the application a final score. It's important for applicants to know that they can request their panel feedback. It will not include their individual scores for each criterion or the panelist's name, but it is an incredibly helpful way of learning more about how your application can be stronger in the future. Once those final scores are determined, the applications are ranked from the highest to lowest score, and we go to the 100% to determine this, and recommended for funding until the funds run out. If there happens to be a tie, the recommendation will be made to our board of directors to determine whether they want to add funds to cover the tie or to reduce funds so that neither applications receive funding. I've been here a year and a half and I've never seen our board reduce funds. They will almost always cover a tie because that seems fair. Pro tip, always request your feedback, whether you are funded or not. Request your feedback. Sometimes you are funded by just the thinnest margin, and strengthening your grant writing skills and making your applications stronger over and over again are only going to be beneficial, and the feedback can help you do that. It's also very helpful to serve on one of these review panels because you get to see what trips up a panel, what may cause confusion, what areas do panels tend to focus on. Every panel is completely different, so we don't really want to compare one panel to another, but there are certain things you can do to strengthen up that application. So serving on a panel, receiving your feedback are all very helpful. I want to remind you again that throughout the application process, we are here to help you. Please feel free to contact me or Melissa, and I look forward to seeing your applications come in.